Hi, everyone. Welcome to Leadership Live by Sounding Board. I am Christine Tao. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Sounding Board. We're a leader transformation platform that provides tech-enabled coaching and mentoring to some of the biggest companies in the world. And we created this series to be able to chat with some dynamic leaders that are doing such interesting things in the space. So I'm thrilled to be welcoming Kevin Stapp to the show today. Hi, Kevin. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi, Christine. Thanks so much for the invite.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed our conversation so much in person. I said, we've got to get more people listening to what you have to say. And so I'm just going to jump right in. I love hearing about your background, and we always start with trying to get to know you a little bit more personally. And so we always ask this question, what's your origin story?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in South Africa, and it was during the time of apartheid in South Africa, and I grew up, I grew up in a household that tended to sort of question things and look at things a little differently. My parents met during an election campaign for an opposition party that was strongly anti-apartheid. And that, I think growing up in a household where you were encouraged to sort of question what you were hearing in the media, and at that stage, it was all state-run media and propaganda. So getting a different perspective was something that was always encouraged when I was growing up, and I think that instilled in me a sense of curiosity. And then also in the country at that time, what was happening is that people of color had more rights in the workplace than they did in civil society. So the workplace in South Africa really sort of absorbed a lot of the political tensions and dynamics that were happening in the country at that time. And it was something that I was always very fascinated by. And I grew up in a small city in the southeast that was known as the Detroit of South Africa. It was the heart of the manufacturing industry, and all the big automobile manufacturers were there. So, right on my doorstep was, there was a lot of news about strikes and lockouts and trade union activity. And it was something that I was particularly fascinated by. And the local university, as a result, really had the best expertise in the country when it came to labor relations, labor law, as well as organizational psychology. So that was my initial entry into this world of human resources and learning and development. Although my initial interest was very much in the employee relations domain.
Yep.
After I finished my studies, I was fortunate to join De Beers. And they had an incredible graduate training program that gave one an exposure to all different parts of the business and all different parts of HR. And I initially joined De Beers in the mining industry in South Africa, which was an incredible place to learn. And I think my first sort of 6 months in the job, as I was on this training program, and I'd come from a background of really sort of studying sort of labor law as it was evolving, and the whole country was transitioning to a democracy. First 6 months in the job, I actually was asked to do the training for all new policies and procedures that had to change because the labor legislation had completely changed as well. So I think that was my first foray into learning, where I was like facilitating something and actually really enjoying it. And I was like, wow, actually, I'm really enjoying sort of this side of HR. And then some years later, I became the head of learning and development for that mine. Some of you may have heard that there was a particularly large diamond discovered in Botswana just last week. And I worked at the mine that still to this day sort of found the world's largest diamond, which was the Cullinan diamond. And, and that time sort of working in learning and development, I was always very impressed at how De Beers were really investing in learning and development, and particularly, people that came from underprivileged backgrounds that were given a chance and really given a great shot at becoming an artisan or an engineer, and a great focus on career growth within the company. And that was, I think something that was important to me, which is, a value of helping people unlock their potential. And that, I think, started my journey, and where I've been in all different facets of HR, but a lot within learning and organizational development.
Yeah, I mean, this idea of unlocking opportunity, right? And what learning, upskilling can do for anyone, not just within a workforce, but to change their life, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we see so many examples of, if you give somebody a fair shot, it's amazing what they can do.
Yeah.
Not to go on too long for this, because I know we don't have a lot of time, but I'm on the board of trustees for an organization that raises funds for the school that I went to in South Africa, and one of the funds are often used for scholarships for children that come from underprivileged backgrounds, and gives them an opportunity to go to an amazing school that really does excel at academics and culture and sport. And if you go onto my website, you'll see a picture of the captain of the South African rugby team, Sia Khaleesi, kissing the World Cup. And South Africa, rugby is like a religion, and they've now won back-to-back World Cups. And Sia is one of those children that got that scholarship to go to my school. And,
amazing.
and he went on to become, captain of the national side that is, now being considered as one of the greatest rugby sides that's ever been around. So it just shows that, if you give somebody a shot, it can be amazing what they can do to really unlock that potential and realize it.
Yeah. And I know, now you've probably got a lot more fans of rugby here in the US, given the recent Olympics and the rise. I know I became an Ilona Mayer fan, and saw the exposure. So what a great story. Well, Kevin, one of the things that I was really struck at when we spoke was just that you had a very forward-thinking vision around what L&D could look like in an organization. And you've really brought that into a lot of your work at not only Beers, but, Bare Essentials, Shiseido, and even Condé Nast. Could you share with us a little bit of what that is?
Sure. Speaking of my De Beers days, I was fortunate to study at London Business School during my time at De Beers. And one of the classes that I took was on corporate strategy. And the London Business School had this fascinating model where they called it the lizard model. So they used that lizard as a metaphor for how organizations can succeed and thrive in this dynamic world in which we find ourselves in. And, if I can explain a little bit of the metaphor, is that the head of the lizard is like it's the vision and the leadership of an organization. So like a lizard, is looking at its environment and it's determining its decision making and its direction. The same as a leadership in a company is deciding on how the vision and the strategic direction of a company. The eyes are scanning for threats and opportunities, much like a company has to scan its market for threats and opportunities. So it is such a great metaphor. But the real takeaway for me was when they got to the tail of the lizard. And the tail of the lizard is the culture. And when we think about it, there's so many corporate strategies fail, so many change efforts fail, and that's often to do with the culture of an organization. And if you don't get that alignment between your culture and what you're trying to execute as your vision and strategy, that's the classic, sort of the tail wagging the dog. That's what often goes wrong. That's where things fall down. And at this time, it's the tail wagging the lizard. So, so the metaphor there is that the tail, much like a lizard, actually, regenerates a tail. so should an organization really get rid of outdated practices that are not in
Mm.
service of the vision and the strategy. And they need to be developing new capabilities. And that was the aha moment for me, which that's where learning comes in. And
Mm.
learning has such an incredibly important strategic role to play. And, through the years, when I was in the beauty industry, there's one example of there was a new leader that came into supply chain, and he had a vision around really improving the margins of that particular brand and reducing the cost of goods sold. And that was a sort of a central part of his supply chain strategy. And he was a very forward-thinking leader, and I was fortunate to partner with him, where the discussion was, how do we integrate learning into every step of making this new strategy a reality? And we
Mm.
partnered with a world-class college in the US that had great expertise in supply chain management, and we tailored a learning program where the entire team could engage on the most important elements of that strategy and decide how they were going to bring it to life and how they were going to make the necessary changes to align to make sure that that strategy was successful. And I think, that's the one example of how critically important learning should be. And organizations often, when they make a strategic pivot or they're making a big announcement or there's some big change that's happening, they think, hopefully they think about what's our communication and change strategy. And sometimes that doesn't go beyond a sort of an announcement and maybe a town hall. But
Yeah.
what they really should be asking is, what's our learning strategy? And I think we're in a time right now where increasingly it's coming easier to integrate that learning strategy into where an organization needs to go.
I mean, we're certainly seeing it with AI, right? Where companies and CEOs are asking, like, how do we upskill our employees and leaders around AI, where it's something so tangible, right? It's this technology disruption that, like, you can just see. So it becomes obvious it has to be part of your strategic business strategy. But do you have any thoughts on when it's not so obvious, right? It's not just this thing here that everybody's pointing to. How do you sort of engage the leader to understand that, like, hey, this question of what's your learning strategy has to be part and parcel with your strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's an opportunity for all learning leaders, and sort of knowing sort of, what are the opportunities to really bring learning into what you are doing in the company.
Mm.
And I always say, as a learning leader, is like, find your use cases.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes it means maybe starting small and piloting, and then really taking the learnings from that pilot study, and then you using that to scale further. So, a lot of the work that I've done in various organizations, often it started small somewhere, and you've gone, hey, you know what? I've got a hypothesis. I believe learning could really make a difference here. Let's test this. And, it's okay if we sort of fail in a small way, but then let's take the learnings and see how we can actually leverage that further. So I think that's always a great approach for learning leaders, especially in environments where maybe there's a little bit of a gap in terms of leaders embracing sort of learning as a strategic function and capability.
Oh, interesting. So you're saying if you can propose that maybe to some of the leaders as a pilot, once you better understand their strategy, it's actually another way to engage them about bringing learning into that, right? So
Absolutely.
smart. I love that. It's like a Trojan horse, right? But it's one that it's like the medicine, that if they took it, it would make everybody feel better and do better. It's how do you get them to do that? I love it. Well, that's one initiative you shared. I know you've run a lot, and I think you also really do have this theme of thinking about how you weave learning into transformation, right? Like you talked about that when you were talking about the lizard and this idea of transformation can't happen without the learning. You had a really interesting example of how you did that even recently in one of your roles. Could you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Most recently at Condé Nast, it's a global media business that was going through significant transformation. and it was an organization that was looking to become a stronger, cohesive global entity and be digital first and diversify its revenue mix. And there was a particular transformation project where it was a number of the great brands that were in the portfolio that were globalizing and going through a major change, and it was needing collaboration and synergy between sort of global teams that simply had not existed before. And in that particular case, the learning strategy was the one activity that was easiest to implement, and the one that was also going to be the fastest to implement was around digital coaching and scaling digital coaching. So the whole thinking was, these leaders that are leading this significant transformation, how do we ensure that that all of them have a coach in their pocket and have 24/7 access to a coach that can really answer their most burning questions at the time of need? And it was, and these weren't just sort of just general coaches. These were coaches that had deep expertise in transformation and change management. And it was a game changer in terms of these leaders having access to these coaches and getting real time coaching and development around the dynamics and the struggles that their teams were experiencing at that point in time. So that was one particular initiative that I was most proud of. And it also, talk about starting small. I don't know if that was necessarily starting small, but it proved I would say the foundation by which sort of digital coaching became embraced within the organization and got applied much more broadly than just sort of leaders that were leading the transformation efforts.
Oh, very interesting. Was it hard for you to help people or other stakeholders across the organization understand the connection between, need to up-level leaders to drive transformation, and then this solution of coaching being the thing that would be the right modality?
Yeah, I would say that I was fortunate in that it was a solution that was very much embraced, and it sure helps when you've got a burning platform. So that was certainly the case, and when I come back to my example where I said, find the use case. And you might have a really great learning tool or methodology in your back pocket, but find the use case. And interestingly, in my in the previous role that I'd been in a different industry, I'd piloted digital coaching as an add-on to a leadership development program. So I was particularly impressed with the results and the impact that it could make. And when I came into the to Condé Nast, I'd pushed for sort of budget for it and got that approval. And I think that was maybe sort of harder than actually sort of finding the use case, because the use case soon became apparent. That wasn't my initial vision wasn't sort of saying, oh, digital coaching, that's going to be scalable, is 100% what we need to use for this transformation. I mean, my initial thinking was, I know this is a great tool. I need, that I know can make a real impact. I need to find a use case for it. And fortunately, it wasn't too long after I was there where this particular initiative came to life, and it was the perfect use case.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also says something about making sure that you're bringing in solutions that can be flexible, right? Or can flex to the needs of the organization, just given how quickly things are changing. And sometimes, we see this too with our clients. They bring in coaching for one program, but then suddenly see that, oh, actually, there's this other use case or other function coming to me with a need where coaching would be a great solution. And being able to have that flexibility to deploy and on a rolling basis. I think a lot of the sort of nature of the lighter implementation with coaching really does lend itself to that.
It does. It's a bit of a snowball effect because everywhere where I've applied digital coaching, people love it. It really drives results. It really does build skill in a very powerful way. And sort of once you sort of unleash this great methodology, it builds demand, and increasingly the organization wants to apply it in a variety of different ways, which I think is always a good thing.
Yeah. Well, certainly we love to hear it at Sounding Board. So, well, Kevin, I might ask you one more question about that before, we're already even getting close to wrapping up. But what is there any learnings in particular you want to share with other L&D leaders around that? I was also struck with the fact that, you did have a broader strategy and other tools that you were utilizing. How did you think about what was appropriate to apply, to which use case?
Yeah, indeed. And certainly in this particular example, in a global media company that was going through transformation, and a really fundamental one, it was digital coaching in that case was the right tool and the right mix. But that's not to say that the digital coaching is kind of the magic tool that's going to apply to everything.
Right.
So I think as a learning practitioner, one needs to sort of know the great variety of tools that are out there, and knowing sort of what are the particular sort of types of initiatives where they can be best applied. I will say, and I'll talk about this maybe in a little bit more detail, but we've seen major advances in generative AI, literally in the last year. And I'm particularly excited about that because I think it's when I come back to the lizard model, it's now the ability to apply learning that is going to be simpler, better, faster, using sort of generative AI. I mean, I've been blown away, quite frankly, by some of the emerging AI tools, and we're still early days. We're hardly even sort of scratching the surface. And I know there's a lot of people that can actually be a little bit unsure or scared of a new technology such as that. But certainly, I think this is a major opportunity for learning and development. And one thing that I will just say is, if we go back into the 90s and, we had, sort of the emergence of web development, and then was it Wix and WordPress came around and democratized web development, where anybody can develop their own website from their kitchen. And, a lot of people were going, oh my goodness, that's the end of sort of, careers in web development. Well, no, not at all, because what that enabled is there was a need for a greater level of expertise that was going to come into place, such as developing an e-commerce ecosystem on that website, and social systems, and many other features. So it actually enabled sort of web developers to operate at the top of their license, as I like to call it, and actually enable sort of greater expertise.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the history, right, of what technology does. We always think it's going to replace, and what we've seen is that it actually elevates, right? Because instead of spending your time on maybe repetitive tasks or things just to get to a certain level, you sort of get people to a baseline quickly where there's now more time, more creativity to think about what you can build on top of that platform that really leverages your expertise and focuses on your specific problem or outcome or industry or what you're trying to solve.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, what I've seen, I saw a piece of research the other day that I thought was particularly interesting. And it was showing that currently 80% of learning and development teams are willfully ignoring AI. 15% of teams are using sort of the same tools, but maybe sprinkling in some AI functionality. And it's really only 5% that are realizing that this is a game changer, and that it's actually going to change not only sort of all L&D workflows, but actually the strategic positioning of the function, which I think is incredibly exciting. So, you know, if I had to give sort of advice to fellow sort of L&D leaders, is embrace this, and it's a real opportunity to, as we're saying, as you can have your teams really sort of operating at the top of their license and really adding significant business value.
Yeah, and I think that's you know, certainly, as we know, top of mind for a lot of folks, not just in the learning space, but across every industry, myself included. Is there anything specific you would share around that? Like, how did you get started, really? You know, like, what's your approach to when you see a cool new tech tool or something coming out?
Yeah, you know, for me, it always goes back to sort of how can we strategically position and add value. You know, back to the lizard model, as I always do, is how do we ensure that the tail is in alignment with the body, so that so that we can unlock performance and potential amongst individuals, but for the organization as well. And I always and if there's, it's not easy to sort of facilitate a big change. So it's finding those use cases, finding your allies internally, and then seeing sort of, hey, can we pilot this in a small, focused way, and then sort of leverage the learnings and use this to build momentum. So that's always sort of typically the approach that I've taken.
Right. Test and learn, iterate and grow, maybe something like that. I love it. I love it. Well, Kevin, these conversations always go way too fast because I always find, I want to ask you one more question, but we are at the end of our time. I have really enjoyed the conversation with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And by the way, my eye just caught the message board as I was talking, and I see one of my former colleagues from my mining days with De Beers, Beverly Fenter, has made a comment. So lovely to see that. Hi, Bev. It's great to see you.
Yes, we get lots of former colleagues that love to cheer you on, hear what you have to say, and catch up on everything that's new with you. So yes, thank you so much for joining us, Beverly, as well as everyone else. Have a great afternoon, and thanks again, Kevin.
You're welcome.